not any formula that we can develop or something that we can do to prevent that from happening. It's going to happen on its own because of God's sovereignty, because of God's timetable of how He sees things in His program. So that it means that not everyone will die, but this is a general statement because of sin. However, because of the rapture we talk about, not everybody entirely will experience death, just like we saw it with two Old Testament characters that we talked about before, Enoch and Elijah. They didn't see death because God took them, from the earth. So it's going to happen for a lot of us at the time appointed. Only God knows it. That there's a group of people that will be on the earth, will never see death, and when that time happens, they're all going to be caught up. In other words, they're going to immediately change from here to up there to meet with Jesus Christ in the air. And so these people, because they have received Jesus Christ in their heart as their Lord and Savior, will never see death. Okay? But though their body, their self will be changed from mortality to immortality. Well, we're not studying about this right now, but we'll talk about later when we get to the place where we study about, the event of rapture or something like that. Okay, moving on. Spiritual death right now. Obviously, when it comes to these two in the garden, they die immediately, spiritually, because the fellowship they had right there in the garden was immediately ceased. Also, on the reasons where we know that was because the moment they ate the fruit from the tree, they went on hiding. They discovered they were naked, and they began to blame one another of the wrongdoing they made, which is obviously true. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God amongst the trees of the garden. Genesis 3 verse 8, which I told you the reason being is because, think about this, which I kind of like need to be reiterated again, that Adam and Eve were husband and wife. Normally a husband and wife should not be hidden themselves away from each other because they're naked. Okay, husband and wife has a natural reality that exists among themselves, that they can be naked before each other. There's not a problem here. Okay, well, some people may have this insecurity from whatever reason. I'm not going to get into this, but that in reality, it makes sense that for a husband and wife to be naked in front of each other. So the reason they were hiding, it was not because of the fact they were naked, even though that's what the Adam says. Yes, that's true. But it was the fact that they were ashamed. The effect of sin started, showing by knowing the shame that they experienced right there in the garden, and that they couldn't contain it. They couldn't get past it. They had to do something, which the first thing they did, they went on hiding. Even though they hide themselves together, but they're still doing it. They do it because they that's exactly what sin does to us all. We tend to go hide before God, as if like God cannot see us wherever we find ourselves. God can see us wherever we are. We go and hide ourselves when we know that we are in sin. And so that's what they did. And the shame was so overwhelming, and so they had to do something. And so that's what they did. They covered themselves with those leaves, and so they can cover, but didn't bring actually any solution of their dilemma by covering themselves. It can only show that their reaction toward what they were experiencing. They reacted toward knowing what happened to them was a shame, was really unbearable, but it didn't actually take away the problem. You know what I mean? God could see them for who they were. And so God asked them the question, why you're hiding? You know what I mean? Who told you that you're naked? Did you eat the food that I told you not to eat? As if like God didn't know that. God was right there watching them, you know, having a good time eating the food. Well, may not be having a good time. I wasn't there. That's my word there, in my expressions. But God was right there with them, seeing them just like it is for us when we're doing wrong. God is right here with you too, seeing you doing it, when you're exercising your free will to do whatever it is that you're doing. And so you don't want that. There's a lesson that actually I taught my daughter, and I kind of reminding her of that every once in a while. It's very important, my friends. And I think that lesson is also for us as adults, much more for us as adults. We want to train our kids to learn that, but it is much more for us as adults, for those who are leaders, for those of us husbands, in a home. You have to understand that. The principle is, with privilege comes responsibility. Okay, it doesn't stop right there. The responsibility is, we have the privilege of life, for example. It doesn't mean that we can go about to do whatever we feel like whenever we want to. The responsibility that we have is to adhere almost every second. I'm kind of exaggerated when I say that. That's why I say almost. To everything that God says with our life. Although we cannot do it, but the idea is right here. So we have to adhere to what God says throughout our lifetime here, so that we can live a life that is pleasing to Him. Let me be very specific about something. Christmas is about to come right now. A lot of kids, I say kids because it makes sense with kids, because kids always expect gifts during Christmas. For those of us adults, we probably don't care that much about that, because we are the one buying the gifts anyway. So every once in a while, we may get the gifts from our, family members, husband and wives and kids also, every once in a while. But really, for those of us adults, we are not really looking forward for Christmas as the kids are looking forward for Christmas, because they know they're going to get a gift no matter what. No matter what, some of them, they'll give you a hint right now what they want for Christmas. They're not saying it, but they're giving you a hint. So you can tell what they're expecting. And then they will act surprised when the day comes when you give it to them. And some of them, they flat out tell you, this is what I want for Christmas. But here's the thing. Let's say if you have a young boy who's about between 10 and 15 years old. Well, a teenage, not a boy. You know what I mean? I'm not really good at this, giving those examples, though. I'm trying. You can tell I'm trying. So you got this kid, between 10 and 15 years old. So you parents, you put together and you bought him a brand new bicycle. The bicycle that you gave him, it's a great gift. And I'm sure he would be so thrilled to have a new bike, especially if his bike has some features on it that other kids around the block don't have that kind of feature. So he's going to show off with that. So you actually made a little sacrifice there to please him, to make him happy, to give him a good Christmas gift. So that's great. And I encourage parents to do that. Every family should find a way to make their kids feel, appreciated and, enjoy each other. So this kid's, the bicycle that he received from Christmas, that's the privilege that he has. He has the privilege of having a new bike. But with that privilege comes also something called responsibility, which is, it's not the parents listen to this. It's not the parents' responsibility to go and to clean the bike. It's not the parents to put away the bike. It's not the parents' responsibility to make sure that the tires are filled with air. Well, it might be occasionally that the kids will ask for help if there's some problem with that the dad mostly will come along and help out. But with the bike, you have the responsibility to take care of it. But also, it doesn't stop here, because with responsibility comes also something called accountability, which means it's another form of responsibility, but it actually says, okay, because of the fact that you have received that privilege, you have to give an account of what you're doing with that privilege that you receive. In other words, you take care of what you receive. Did you take care of it the right way? Did you take care of it at all? Did you do something that you're not supposed to do? Or did you kind of trying to show that you're taking care of it, but it actually was not? So there will be a time that you give an account of what you've done with the privilege that you receive. Does that make sense to you guys? So that's exactly what's happened here when it comes to life. God gave each one of us life. With that life, it comes with responsibility. You know that very well, because I'm going to give you an example and you know what I'm talking about. When you wake up in the morning, I hope that is true for all of us, because the result will be really bad if it's not true. You wake up in the morning, you got to go brush your teeth. Do you understand what I'm saying? You may not do it, after lunch. You may not do it when you go to bed, because that's something not everybody tends to do. But the majority of people will wake up in the morning and go brush their teeth. I'm sure every person will do that, even if they don't have the necessary means to do it, but they find a way to clean their teeth in the morning, to brush their teeth, to wash their mouth. I guess that's what I'm trying to say here. So what does that mean? You also take the opportunity every single day you wake up, you take showers. You may not take 2 or 3 showers a day, but at least you take one. So you take care of yourself in the best that you know how. Why? That is the privilege you have with your life, because you do have to take responsibility of taking care of yourself. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be accountability. For those little kids, in there, mom always asks this question, mostly moms. Before they go to bed, did you brush your teeth? Or the kids will say, yes, mommy. Or the other says, no, Tyler didn't do it yet. Tyler, you got to go brush your teeth. And then mom would encourage Tyler to go brush his teeth. That kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of accountability right here. When the children are growing up, you give them more privileges. So they got more responsibilities. So that means the accountability is greater. For those of us parents who work outside the home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You go work for an employer. You have somebody that runs the company. You are accountable to this person. They give you a privilege to work there. They give you actually tools to work with. Those tools are your responsibility to perform the work they hire you for, the privilege they give you to work. At the end of the day, you're going to have to give an account of the things that they gave you to do, so that they will see whether or not, for most of you, if you deserve a raise, or if you don't deserve to work here anymore, and then they ask you to go home and take you, they'll come back. You understand that lesson. Even if you never knew that they call privilege, responsibility, and accountability, you understand that I would say that this example right here, because you've done it all the time. You follow? The privilege of driving in the street, you also have the responsibility to drive to avoid accident. Accident happen because of negligence. Okay? But you are responsible to stop at the stoplight. Okay, you're responsible to stop when there's a stop sign. To stop there, they also have a responsibility to respect the speed limit. Although most of us don't do it, if you want to be honest. But you know exactly what I'm talking about. So, but because there's also accountability. When you do wrong, you see the police officer, the law enforcement person, comes to you and says, okay, this is why I'm giving you a ticket. Because the privilege of driving they give you, you're supposed to be responsible not to speed in an area where it says the speed limit is 40, you are going around for 80 miles an hour. If you're being served with a ticket, that means you are accountable for this. You need to take responsibility for your wrongdoing. Not only for that, but also responsibility to make sure that you drive 40 miles in an area that it says 40 miles, not 80 miles. So therefore, they give you a ticket to remind you of your responsibility. Not so much of punishing you, but to remind you so next time you don't do it again, even though you have to pay a fine. But every time you look at the ticket, it will remind you of the things that you've done. My friend, I don't see the difference here when it comes to spirituality. There's no difference right here. God placed all of us here in this earth. When we come here, He gave us the privilege of life. None of us went to any place, not either by us personally or by our parents, those who have brought us into this world, to say, okay, let's go purchase a life. Okay, there's no such thing. Speaking of this, there's something come in my mind. I can't help to tell you. I'm going to tell you in a minute. You know what I mean? It just never happened. But God gave you the privilege of life. So what do you expect, my friend? You think you come to this life, there should be no responsibility for it? You've got to take responsibility of your life. How do you take responsibility? It's right here, written in this book, to tell you what your responsibilities are concerning the life that God has given you. Because at the end of the day, there's going to be what we call also accountability. Because we're all going to have to stand before God and give an account for what we've done while we are here on earth. Here's what I was a little chuckle about. We know that in this earth, I'm going to have to talk to this about that, because I know there's a lesson I'm going to teach you going to make more sense. But because of the fact I just mentioned this, I got to tell you, because I'm tempted to do that. You see, people out there, they purchase a life insurance policy. Do you realize this life insurance policy you purchase, it's not actually about life, it's about death, my friend. You purchase a life insurance, he calls, I wonder why they didn't call it death insurance instead of life insurance. In order for you to get, not you who is the owner of the policy, it's a beneficiary. In order to get benefits from that, you have to die. And some of you, unfortunately, I probably find myself in the same category right now. You worth more in death than you are alive, because your insurance policy, what they're going to pay you, it's worth more than you ever made while you were alive. And that's the reason why sometimes you see, unfortunate things happen when people find out. Some of those people, not everybody does that actually, I hope not, happen, because people who are known that they're a beneficiary, anyway. So I just don't want to get into this. But the problem is, what I'm saying is, what we're studying right here concerning sin, when we see these three types of deaths, even though if you were to buy a life insurance, you cannot outdone. You cannot it cannot be outdone. That's what I meant to say. You're going to die anyway. You're going to die, so you got to be prepared for it. Just like I was explaining, death is coming. Some of you already have your life insurance policy, because it's coming, so therefore you're not going to leave your family stranded with debts and that kind of stuff to make some people, they are very irresponsible. But we're talking about you have to take responsibility in your life because the accountability is coming later. They live behind their parents, stranded with a lot of situation because of the death that happens to you. And I hope that every one of us will make provision to avoid that from happening. So we're saying that as a result of them discovering the knowledge of good and evil, they began to experience things they did not experience before. Therefore, they also began to die physically. The process of dying entered their lives immediately, and the Lord had to remove them from the garden as well. See, what happened though, do you realize where there's a sinful environment, it's always kind of like, in a secluded area. See, sinful environment doesn't allow, I would say, purity. If you involve in things that are sinful, it always happens in a place where it's by itself. Not everybody is kind of like, involved in it. It's always a group of people that are doing it separately. And so what happened though, the moment that, this is the thing for these people, the moment they became sinners, they were not born that way. That's a big difference between these two and the rest of us. The moment they became sinners, God says, okay, the environment that you were in, no longer yours. He evicted them. You got to get them out. So they have to find their own way in life. So I hope that you guys understand the reality of what these people were going through in the moment that God, imagine you living in such a luxurious place, a place where you have available to you everything that you want to eat, and it don't cost you absolutely a thing. Okay, you can eat day and night whenever you want. There's nothing you lack of. Everything was there. And then now you get to a place where now that God said to you, in order for you to eat now, my friend, you're going to have to work really hard, and by the sweat of your brow, that's how you're going to eat. Okay, you're going to have to do it in order to survive. So the luxury that you have available to you is no longer available to you. You lose that privilege. Why? Because Adam and Eve, they didn't take responsibility the way that God prescribed it to them. So when the accountability came, when God had to ask them what they did, God had to take some measure against them. My friend, that's exactly what's going to happen to most of us who are still rebelling against the Word of God by saying all kinds of crazy stuff, of saying that there's no God, or there's no such thing, when you die, you die. There's no such thing about your soul, or this and this and that. Well, you are a grown-up person. You have the ability to exercise your free will. Is that the way you want to exercise your free will? That's your prerogative. I cannot tell you to change that. But all I can tell you, my friend, there's going to be a time, the day of reckoning. Okay, there's going to be a time where you're going to have to stand before God and give the account that you don't want to give right now. Because right now, you have the privilege. You got to get into the responsibility that God's given you, which is to adhere to His Word concerning His creation. This creation that He made, He created. You didn't purchase it. You didn't pay a dime for it. You didn't do anything. It didn't cost you absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. So all these things are privilege. They are been free to you. The air that you're breathing every single day costs you nothing. Still this day, costs you nothing. The sun that's shining right here costs you absolutely nothing. You follow what I'm saying? All these things that you know of, the trees that you see around you, okay, they cost you absolutely nothing. So there'll be a time you're going to have to be giving an account for those things. So therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man. This is the verse right here. Genesis 3:23 and 24. He drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims and a flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. Genesis 3 and verses 23 and 24. I think I can spend the whole, I would say, the rest of the day and even more talking about these two verses right here. But I'm going to try to shrink it down a little bit so that we can move on. But we can come back to it later on. Okay? So what happened though? Remember I talked to you before that when God was giving prescription to Adam concerning the fruit that was in the midst of the garden, remember the principle that we talked about last time, that everything in life comes in pair. Like you see right here, I have a right hand and also a left hand. Oh, you can tell it this way. The left hand is the opposite of my right hand. Or my front side is the opposite of my back side. Or you can say I have two sides. I have front and back. Or I have side from the right and also left. So anything you see in life, they comes in pair or the opposite of the other. You know, there's high, there's low. Okay? If there's life, there's death. If there's also hungry, there's also feel. You know, I mean, you feel. Okay? If there's a sadness, there's also joy, and so forth. You understand that? So, in the garden right there, when God was talking to Adam concerning the fruit that was in the midst of the garden, at the same time, the fruit of life was also there. God didn't mention that, not because he didn't know, but because of the fact that at the moment, there was not any reason to prescribe that. I want to make that clear. I want for you guys to understand it very, very clear. That's why I keep coming back to this and trying to reason with you so you can see it very clear. A doctor would never prescribe his patient a medication that he or she doesn't need. No doctor will prescribe you, I would say, prescribe you intentionally. I hope that's not true, that they would prescribe you something that you don't need. But intentionally, to prescribe you a medication for something that you're not suffering from. If you don't have any problem, if you don't have a heart problem, there's no need for any physician to prescribe you medication for heart disease. The same way, if you are not diabetics, you're not going to receive from a doctor a prescription about diabetes. Doctor will prescribe you only what you have a problem of. That's the reason why they go to school to study a lot. Because they're not juggling around, you know, this medication, it sounds really good, it might work for this. No, they know precisely and exactly what type of medication that works for your problem. Unless if that medication doesn't exist yet, but they know exactly the base formula of the medication. There might be different names, but they probably have the same formula. Why? Because that's what they study from medical school. So they have the knowledge to know exactly what to prescribe for any type of disease concerning what the problem is. So that's what happened here in the garden. God had no need to tell Adam, specifically the man, that there's a tree in the garden called the tree of life, because Adam didn't need that. But right here, after now, Adam discovered that they ate the fruit of knowledge of good and evil. Now death is coming for them. Guess what happened? God says, okay, let's kick them out of the place where there is also the tree of life. We don't want them to go get the tree of life. We want to keep them away from that. And that is the reason why, my friend, the tree of life is going to come later. But we have to go through the series of these things that God says, based on the responsibility that He's giving us, even right now at this moment. Adam had his responsibility. His responsibility was to till the ground, was to watch over everything, to take care of the garden. His responsibility was also not to eat the fruit that was in the midst of the garden. He was responsible to eat anything else. That was the privilege that God giving him. But what happened though, he listened to the voice of his wife, and then he went ahead and ate the fruit that was forbidden not to touch, not alone to eat it. So now, when he's standing accountable before God, instead of saying, I have done this, he says, this woman did it to me. And so God says, okay, because you are listening to the voice of your wife, here's what's going to happen to you. And then now, let me kick you out of this place, preventing you from coming back. But God says, okay, they can sneak back again to the garden. God actually delegated. Look at the verse again. Genesis chapter 3, verses 20-24. Let's read that. It says, he drove out the men and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubims. Do you know what cherubims are? They are one of those God's elite soldiers in God's army. Okay, so God put him there, not only put him there, but also in a flaming sword, which turned every way. So that no matter how, Adam was trying to sneak back in, that sword would cut him in pieces. Not only cut, but they also have fire in it. So Adam cannot come close, because the fire would actually burn him, to keep them away of the tree of life. My friend, here's what happened. The tree of life, you cannot come to it on your own. It has to be given to you. It has to be given to you. And to be given to you, you have to find it. You have to ask for it. That's what. You heard me well. You have to ask for it. It's not available to you like it was available in the garden, so that you could go. But now the question I'm asking myself, and I keep wondering, they probably did not know that there were this fruit in the garden. They probably did not know that there was this fruit in the midst. I don't know exactly where it was, because the Bible doesn't say exactly where the tree of life was in the garden. The Bible never said anything about that. But he was there. They probably never knew where he was. So let's say some people said that, I heard them, that what if they ate the fruit from the tree of life before they ate the fruit from the tree of life of good and evil? What would that do? Would they still die? We'll never know, because it never happened. That's my answer to you. I don't know if that would be possible, because in medicine, it doesn't matter in some ways, as I would say. I'm not a medical, science